We are on.
All right, so we're starting with let's get this right. The Vartara, Shvetashvatara
Shveta.
Upanishads. The second one's
Shvetashvatara.
easier to pronounce. Um, I like the opening. What is the cause of the cosmos? This is like,
Yeah.
cosmos here, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
it Brahma? Also the questioning element, almost sort of Socratic. From where do we come? By what live? Where shall we find peace at last? What power governs the duality of pleasure and pain by which we are driven? um, and then he unfolds all of that
Mm-hmm.
um, in this Upanishad. This is a lot of this is the one where we get this sort of personalized version of God
Yeah, we
toward the
get
end.
Shiva is
Shiva
mentioned at the end. Yeah.
is like repeated throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this sort of Brahman, the ground of being, ultimate consciousness, and then it gets sort of like localized toward the end into one particular god,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. Sort of that shift between the I don't know, the abstract and the concrete,
Yeah.
right? Right. Um, and I believe Shiva is the god of. Well, maybe it's creation and destruction. I thought it was destruction, but maybe it's creation and destruction, right?
Yeah. I think towards the
The
end it's like Lord Shiva, creator, destroyer. So
Yeah, yeah.
both.
Has both particular functions. Um, so this, I'm not sure if it was in this one or the other. The other was really good as well, but it was sort of interesting in terms of like, um, I mean, we have a lot of the similar themes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Page 159, in the depths of meditation, sages saw within themselves the Lord of Love, who dwells in the heart of every creature. So this is back to the whole like Atman Brahman connection. Um,
The
yeah, I
gunas.
mean,
What
we.
is gunas? Gunas?
Oh, that was those. I looked that up. It's attributes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Those were like. Are you on the first page still or
Yeah,
no?
yeah. Behind the gunas of law, energy,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and inertia.
yeah. That's the first page.
Yeah, 159. Very,
Oh,
very
oh,
last line.
bottom.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Those are sort of like all attributes of God or Brahma.
Mm-hmm.
Brahma. Um, we've got a lot of these similar themes on 160. Those who perceive him in every creature merge in him and are released from the wheel of birth and death. It was funny. I had this sort of thought as I was reading this that I forget if it's Freud, but it's some um, uh, psychologist of note who was basically saying that a lot of religion, this is a secular spin on it, but a lot of religion essentially is um, dealing with the fear of death, right?
Okay.
So, in
Yeah,
other words,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
that humans die, and if you look at all religions, at some level, you know, I don't know. We'll see when we come to Confucianism because I feel like that's very sort of like day to day in this world, concrete, practical.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason I just kept on thinking about that. It was like, we're trying to escape this wheel of birth and death. We're struggle. We struggle with death, and with the idea of our own mortality comes an element of ennui or sorrow,
Mm-hmm.
and the Upanishads are trying to overcome that, And I'm not taking like the secular spin that's just sort of like some um
Coping
like
mechanism.
exactly,
Yeah, I think it
but
was
there,
Spong, at least one person,
yeah,
who brought that up as religions are basically trying to solve that, like basically give us a way to understand death or cope with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if maybe there's other people who also talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've been reading a lot of Victor Davis Hanson lately,
Hmm.
former classicist, and that version is is actually not a coping mechanism, sort of the Greek view. That version is literally, it's tragic.
Mm.
So in
Hmm.
other words, it's not absurd like the existentialist, but it's tragic. Like in other words, it's there are very beautiful things in life, and we're here, and we have all these endeavors, and then we die, and at least in the Greek world, the ancient Greek world, that could be a young the young death of a soldier, like
Right.
that's so there's a little bit more of a from, and that's not so much their religion, it's more like a broad Greek view. Within that view, um it's sort of an acceptance of the tragedy of mortality,
Hmm.
as opposed to um like in other words, it's like almost like a realist one, like just like hard realism, like you die. It's the way of the world. You need to come to terms with that reality without a gloss.
Right.
Yeah. Now
Like embracing
here,
it.
yeah, exactly. Here, of course, it's not to say that some of the thinkers in the Greek world had versions of afterlife, etc. But
Hmm.
it's not to say that this is a coping mechanism, but that kept on popping in. It was like we want to get over this sorrow, we want to get over this fear, you know. Um, so you could look at it as a coping mechanism, and or this is something that's realizable.
Hmm.
Like in other words, like this is real. Like I am Brahman, and I need to do the austerities and the work and the disciplines to realize it. And then when I realize it, I overcome.
Yeah, and something that now the book that I have has been marked up by some previous reader,
Yeah.
and oh, where was it? Yeah, I mean this is later, but just to since we're on the topic of death, this is on 177, the
Mhm.
third, verse
Sure.
16. Um,
Sure.
it says, "May we realize him in our consciousness. There is no other way to conquer death." And then
Hmm.
the previous reader wrote a note around conquer death, and then says, "Why not embrace it?" And I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. Like, why are we trying to overcome it and conquer it,
Yeah.
as opposed to like embrace it in what it is? So that to your point, I don't know. It's interesting. Um,
Totally.
and I don't know if that's just this Upanishad that kind of focuses on the conquering aspect, and maybe there's another one that
Yeah.
is more about embracing it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
My sense, though, is that from what we've read, and you find this in a lot of world religions, um, death is a problem in a lot of world religions.
Hmm.
That is like it's so within the Judeo-Christian Islamic, going back to the Book of Genesis, it's part of the curse,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Right? You will die. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So it's in that case, it's problematic.
Hmm.
You know, and I feel like with a lot of the Upanishads, there is this element of like escaping the, and not even just death, but also the cycle of
Yeah.
rebirth,
Yeah.
right?
Because it's like you're
Um,
stuck,
yeah,
and so
exactly. It's a rut. It's a personal and metaphysical rut.
hmm
You know, I mean, I'd like to say that it's not an entirely bad rut to be in, but the moments of bliss that we experience are not like that of ultimate bliss.
hmm
According to this. The it'll be interesting when we go to Buddhism, and Taoism as well, in terms of, because as we talked about last time, Buddhism, the problem is suffering, right?
Right.
That's the thing. It's not original sin or anything like that.
Hmm.
and Taoism, I feel like the problem is not being in harmony with nature, but I would imagine the death is going to pop up in that equation, at some point,
Right, right.
you know. Uh, but but yeah, within the Judeo-Christian tradition, I mean, it's Adam could have Adam and his descendants could have lived forever in the garden in the presence of God,
Hmm.
and then you know, so it's problematic in that. So I don't know. I don't know if we would see it embracing in this tradition.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I'm not opposed to it, but
Yeah, I guess if you're trying to get out of the cycle, then
yeah,
I mean, I don't know, unless you're a person who's stuck in the cycle always,
yeah,
I don't know if that's possible.
that's a good one.
Like you have to embrace it.
Yeah, in that regard, right? Exactly. I've got to break. I have to embrace the cycle. I mean, it seems like what needs to be embraced is the Lord of Love. That if you're going to direct yourself toward anything, almost
Hmm.
like in the other Upanishad that we read in this session, um, it's the Lord of Love is the target, right?
Hmm.
That was a beautiful image, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was you are the bow or you are the arrow, and then
Mm.
and yeah, so like ultimate passion and embrace ultimate ought to be ultimately with God, or the God within,
Right.
you know. I mean, we've got repeated themes here. 160, bottom of the separate self, not yet aware of the Lord, goes after pleasure only to become bound more and more. When it sees the Lord, there comes an end to its bondage. It reminds me of St. Paul's being a slave to sin, the element
Hmm.
of bondage. On 161, meditate on him, be absorbed in him, wake up from this dream of separateness. A little bit lower, meditate and realize that this world is filled with the presence of God.
Hmm.
So I saw a lot a lot, from Upanishad to Upanishad, a lot of the similarity of the problem of sorry, themes, the
Hmm.
problem of separateness, the problem of pleasure and pain, um, the problem of the lack of awareness or self-realization, right? And it brings all of these sort of negative consequences.
Right.
It was interesting on 163. Um, at the top, it reiterates yet another theme of the practice of meditation, but a little bit lower, it says, this is section 4 or verse 4, whatever. Great is the glory of the Lord of life, infinite, omnipresent, all knowing. He is known by the wise who meditate and conserve their vital energy. I was sort of like thinking about that.
Hmm.
As it goes on, I'm going to skip 5, but then it goes on to 6. Kindle the fire of the Kundalini deep in meditation. Bring your mind and breath under control. And then poetically and beautifully, drink deep of divine love and you will attain the unitive state. And the Kundalini is that's you're familiar with the chakras, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Kundalini is at the base. It's sort of it's at the lower part of the set of chakras,
Hmm.
so our core, and then it's energy that I believe because the image is like a coiled snake.
Yeah.
It's energy that arises up, you know. But I was sort of thinking about like, and I feel, and this is the first time we've sort of gotten something like this, like vital energy Kundalini.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, we've got, and I also like the expression "bring your mind and breath under control." um, but I was sort of curious what your take is on conserve their vital energy. Like what does that mean? What does that look like?
It's a good question. Um, conserve their vital energy. Conserve their, yeah.
Vital, life-giving, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, what? Wait. Who is there in this sense? I'm wondering.
I think this is the one who is ultimately, um,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. All great
who's
super.
self-realized.
He's known. Oh, the wise, right? He's
Yeah.
known by the wise who meditate and conserve their vital energy. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So their life force, their life
Yeah,
energy.
I
Yeah.
imagine.
Do you think that by meditating you are conserving that energy?
Sort of thinking about like, with energy, like, all right, so w- both you and I, all humans and other animals, we have energy. Um, and then there's a question about what end it's used for. Where does
Mm-hmm.
it go? What, right? So I'm thinking like maybe like the images pop in my mind, sort of like a toddler, just the energy is just everywhere, right? It's just going everywhere, in talk, in body, in motion, in movement, um, and maybe it's a bit scattered, like the monkey mind, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's an element of taking that energy. Of course, as we get older, we slow down, but we taking that energy. And maybe, right, when you conserve something, you're protecting it, right, or you're holding it for some purpose,
Yeah.
uh, like a conservation. Um, so if you're conserving it, maybe it is being conserved ultimately for, as it goes a little bit lower, mind and breath under control, meditation, um, or we can hit it, we can connect it to the other yogas of concentration on the scriptures, or devotion to a deity,
Mm-hmm.
focus on work, right? And then the raja obviously is deep meditation. Something like where you're taking that whole of your energy, and it's like instead of it being scattered like the toddler, and that's fine because that's age appropriate. But as one is getting older and wiser, how do I allocate that energy?
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
and or I mean, I guess you could also sort of add to that, like, I mean, I know energy is not time, but like, what am I doing with my time? What am I doing with the time that I'm allotted in a given day? How am I using that? Right? That's, if there's work, there's energy involved, right? Or if I'm acting, there's energy involved. So am I able to sort of like curtail some activities in order to use that energy for the ultimate exercises that allow me to realize
Yeah. I wonder
uh,
if.
Brahman.
I
You know,
wonder if there's like a correlation or something related to like flow state and how
yeah,
time passes. If, well, it feels like it's slow and long at the same time when you're
yeah,
in a flow state.
yeah.
Um, and by meditating, like I feel like meditating kind of slows time down, and so you feel like you're experiencing every second of it, and so like you're conserving energy by being in the moment. Whereas when you're monkey brain or just doing
Energy
whatever,
there.
then you're
Yeah.
you're very time is moving quickly. The energy is moving quickly, I guess.
Behind on cleaning the house. I've got an hour. Colleen's coming home, and I want it to look pretty.
Yeah.
I'm just all over the place. It's just right.
Hmm.
I see I want to put away. The floor needs to be swept. These dishes need to be put away. I'm trying to do it all at once, none effectively, right? Because I haven't, used my time well.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's sort of like scattered energy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to, you're absolutely right, when you're sitting in meditation and you are focused on your breath, and things have sort of settled, it's a very pointed use of energy,
Hmm.
you know. Um, It's interesting. Another thought comes to mind. I remember a while ago reading about some actors. I don't know who had been somewhat accomplished, in film and Hollywood, and then they wanted to go back and like get another degree. Maybe they already got an acting degree or something, and they wanted to like add to it.
Hmm.
And what they did was they went entirely sober during that period and put a lot of restrictions on their interactions, and then also they were uh, what's the fashionable what's the good word for not having sex? Right? That word. You know, uh, what is that word?
Abstinent?
Abstinent. Yeah, that's fine. But there's another one. But yeah, but they were, and the point was to focus.
Hmm.
So I don't, and not only do I not want to be distracted by this, but also focus, and and not to get well, I mean, we've crossed so many lines before, but um there is something within this tradition, and I'll have to look it up, about the retaining semen, not releasing semen
Isn't that
as or
like Taoist? Isn't that?
it could be, but I almost want to say there's something, kicking around my brain, like back in the day when I was, teasing around with Hinduism and meditation and yoga. I feel like there was something there where it was like you don't like, and I'm wondering if that's partly the vital energy, especially the Kundalini's low,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Actually, that there's a power in semen, and the release of it weakens the individual. I'll give you an example. I know within professional sports,
Hmm.
uh, athletes actually won't have sex prior to a match or a game. I mean, not all of them, but you know what I'm saying? The idea of this is sort of building within me,
Hmm.
and there is a weakness that comes as a release, as it were, right? You're exhausted. And you retain that as a force,
To release
actually.
during the game, essentially, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
Or to use as a
Yeah.
resource
Yeah.
during the game.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm
But
pretty sure I read that on something recently, and I'm pretty sure it's a Taoist or
yeah, that's
Confucianism
fair.
and Taoist. Are those the same or are those different?
Confucian is no, they're both Chinese, but
Okay.
Confucianism is going to be much more
No.
social,
Okay, I think
like
it was
family,
Taoism.
community, society.
Hmm.
Tao
And
is nature,
I
nature
think it
based.
was retention of all bodily fluids.
Yeah,
So, including
exactly.
like spit and blood
Yeah.
and everything.
Which, by the way, in the sports analogy, it makes sense because if you just want to simplify it, um, you take that urge
Hmm.
and you channel it into the game.
Yeah.
If you just want to totally simplify it without spiritualizing it. Um, so yeah, that sort of popped up in my mind.
Hmm.
Oh, and by the way, a nice little segue. Bottom of 163. Be seated in spinal column erect.
Yeah.
So that's that is key.
With the
I love,
mantra echoing in heart.
like really practical, like instructions on places. Choose a place for meditation that is clean, quiet, and cool. A cave, smooth floor. No, it's great. It's like
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, I was
anyway.
not expecting that. I was like,
No,
oh
no.
wow, it's
Yeah,
changed
I
to an
love that. Instead of
instructional.
it being this high-minded sort of wisdom, esoteric wisdom, it's now like, okay, here are the instructions.
Hmm. Yeah, oh, and then right before that you have the reins of the horses
Yep.
analogy brought back.
That we saw in another Upanishad. Um, what else sort of?
Oh yeah, it also kind of just talks about what someone experiences in meditation here. in
Oh
deep
yeah,
meditation, right? It's like see forms like
that
snow or smoke,
was interesting.
blowing wave of heat, strong wind blowing or wave of heat. They may see within them more and more light, fireflies, lightning, sun, or moon. These are signs that they are well on their way to Brahman.
Wild. That's like a page you need to earmark as we work on our meditation. Have you seen
Mm.
any fireflies lately?
In yourself, yeah.
And then look, health, a light body, freedom from cravings, a glowing skin.
Hmm. Sonorous voice,
Yeah.
fragrance of body. That could mean a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
Are you not showering? No.
Yeah. These indicate progress in the practice of meditation. I imagine that would, well, fragrance, not odor.
Right, to each their own.
Yes, fair, fair. Um, yeah, light comes up a lot, as another theme.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even in
Radiant.
like the ones we talked about last time, there were like all of the, well, I don't know how much we talked about those specifically, but there were the different feet of God
Mhm,
or of Brahman.
mhm.
And there's like the northwest, east, south. But then there was like there were four forms of light. It was like sun, moon, stars, and lightning or something.
Right, right.
And like those like four things are brought up, I feel like in so many places, and sometimes they change a little bit. Like in here, it's fireflies, lightning, sun, or moon. But it is interesting how those are often brought up. And then even again, like when we were talking about the king, and it was like, what is our guide, like our light? And it's like, oh, the sun is what
Right,
guides
that's the
us.
one
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. When we don't have that,
The
right?
moon. Yeah.
Moon, fire. I think it even got to speech, right?
Yeah. Speech.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
self. The self was a light, the final light, I think, in that story.
Hmm. I felt like this would be a really great prayer on 166. Um, Might be a nice little mantra
Which
to put
part?
one to put oneself asleep. Five. O Lord, in whom alone we can find peace, may we see your divine self and be freed from all impure thoughts and all fear. There was something like poetic about it,
Yeah.
and it sounded like a little like not all of these sound like prayers, but that does,
Hmm.
right? Because
Hmm.
you're appealing to the Lord, you're appealing to God. Um, on the next page, 167, I thought it was interesting. He says, He fills the cosmos, yet he transcends it. So we've got one of those oppositions. Those who know him leave all separate. I sort of I underlined all four of these. It was interesting. It was like those who know him leave all separateness, sorrow, and death. So separateness, sorrow, and death.
Hmm.
Those who know him not live but to suffer.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like the separateness is like fundamental, like the fundamental, like well, it's not. I don't know if it's the fundamental problem, but it does seem, it's like, in other words, sorrow and death,
Hmm.
right? Are they sort of connected? Or I'm sorry, sorrow and our orientation, our unenlightened orientation to death, is that connected to the problem of separateness? I
Hmm.
feel like the fundamental problems or the problem of separateness, mm, and let's say the uh, either unwieldy senses and or um, seeking out pleasure. It's like a mix of those because ego pops up in there.
Hmm.
Maybe actually the fundamental problem is the problem of the ego, and the causes are the Maya illusion of separateness.
Hmm.
Um, and it's sort of interesting to think about, like whether, well, no, I feel like our desire for pleasures is really more connected to senses, but
Sure.
also
Which
maybe,
separate us from non-sensual things, I guess.
yeah, I was wondering whether or not the idea of separateness is connected to the desire for pleasures. I don't really think so though. I think the desire for pleasures is based more on the senses, right? I see something that's pretty, I taste something that is sweet,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that is soft, right? That seems to be more like senses are the sense it's a senses nexus or pleasure nexus as opposed to a separateness thing. Almost separateness seems a bit separate from that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
but
it
I would
comes down to
say
like self-control, and I don't know. I don't know. That's not.
yeah, all of it though, ego is reinforced. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing myself as separate from you and the rest of all living beings in the universe, now I am an individual,
Right.
right? This individual, in addition to that, this individual has senses, and I sense pleasure and I sense pain,
Mm-hmm.
and along the spectrum, and I push toward pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I push toward pleasure because I want this, then I build up ego.
Right. Right.
Or I build up ego, um, this goes back to the whole Buddhist notion. I'm actually creating this cycle of suffering because um, one pleasure is not going to do. It's not going to be like, yep, one bowl of ice cream for life. I'm fine.
Right.
No, you're going to want it again. You're going to want it on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the I keeps on popping back up,
Mm-hmm.
uh, solidifies, and then I'm sorry, to go back to the Buddhist notion, I continue this cycle of suffering, right? Oh, I want this.
Mm-hmm.
I search it out. I have it. I'm satisfied. Now it repeats, right? Um, so, um, so yeah, I would essentially say within this system, ego is the big problem, and um, its existence or its illusion is supplemented by these pieces. Senses pleasure
Mm-hmm.
and the idea separate from everything else.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
I think that makes sense. I
and
mean,
it's interesting too that when you are self-realized according to this tradition,
mm-hmm.
the bliss apparently, well, I'm sorry, that the Upanishads speak of is infinite
Yeah.
versus the ice cream.
Yeah.
Because the ice cream is going to be it's going to be finite, it's temporal, and passing and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
Mm-hmm.
the infinite bliss of um, you know, experiencing your true self, capital S self, is it's way beyond any pleasure that we can, seek here. Which is interesting because it's funny because there's that, that still means I'm seeking pleasure of a sort.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
not it's clearly not based on the senses, and it's clearly not based on ego or what I want and stuff like that. It's probably a different, you know, I mean, maybe pleasure is not the right word, but it's probably a pleasure of an infinite level that is, um, I don't know, maybe connected to the entire metaphysic of uh, true reality,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the ice cream or whatever else is just it pales in comparison. It's small, it's petty, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wonder if it's how much of it is it feels more like it's worth it, like or you have to put more
Yeah,
work in to get it, right? Like a lot more.
that's
Um,
just the
that's just what.
it's just the classic story. Immediate pleasures
Mm-hmm.
it comes from Atomic Habits, and I thought it was an interesting section. Immediate pleasures are for the present self,
Mm-hmm.
and delayed gratification is for the future self.
Right.
And delayed gratification, or even just saying that delayed, I don't even need to qualify it. The fact that it's delayed
Mm-hmm.
means that there's work,
Mm-hmm.
means that there's discipline, means that there's self-control, and you can throw in all the other disciplines that we talked about with the Houston Smith introduction and austerities. It's the difference between the present self and the future self.
Yeah.
So uh, I'm just dovetailing on your idea of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I wonder how much of it is the pleasure you get out of it is from the work you put in it, or if it actually is not the same kind of pleasure. And it's
Yeah,
like the pleasures of senses are very embodied and
yeah,
like I don't know, like energetic, embodied,
yeah,
like close. But when
yeah,
you get to this kind of ultimate state, if it's it's like relaxed and distant. And so it's
yeah,
like a totally different kind of pleasure because you are like away from all of the perturbations of life and
yeah,
like the energy. And so it's not a kind of pleasure you could experience any other way, right?
yeah,
Like I'm wondering if is it about like, oh, it's like the same like feeling, but you had to put work into it, or is it like a totally different experience that you just
yeah,
can't even compare? And so
yeah.
using a word pleasure is just the closest thing
Well,
you can
what's
get.
also interesting too, I just thought about this, is that when we went through the stages of meditation with Raja Yoga, right, in
Hmm.
our first, right, it I'm forgetting all the levels,
Hmm.
but at some level, and possibly the deepest, right, there's ego loss.
Yeah.
So this is not the it's interesting to sort of think about when I am sorry, when I'm ego driven, okay, or in the ego state,
Hmm.
when I'm seeking pleasure, what is that? And
Hmm.
then it's an interesting thing to think about. Of course, you and I can't
What is
we can
egoless pleasure?
there you go. Yeah. Of course, we can't none of us, neither of us, according to the Upanishads, are self-realized, so we don't know that yet.
Hmm.
But it would be egoless pleasure, um, and that's an interesting sort of like distinction to think about. You know, the when I'm ego-ridden, I want this, I'm building up the I. You know what? We can throw in this too. It's a bit selfish, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, because
Hmm.
it's self-supporting, reinforcing. So it's not selfish. There is no ego that's now mediating the pleasure. I mean, you're one, and this goes back to the whole flow thing you were talking about. Of course, you're talking about that with time,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
this goes to the whole flow thing where you are like so deeply um, sort of enmeshed in the present that there's no thought about it. I mean, that's another one too. I've always thought that it was funny. Like when you're in flow, you're not thinking, "Man, this is nice. I'm in the flow right now." Right? Then you're out.
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
So like when you're having a good time with your friends and you pull back and you think for a moment, "Man, I'm having a really good time." You're actually not at that moment. You're thinking about it. There's something in the way.
Yeah.
And all that is gone. So I feel like you are literally. Um, I mean, I doubt even you'd reflect on it in the moment. Egoless pleasure, right? I don't think there's an element of like, hey, this is bliss. I imagine it just is.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and also, I don't think I mean, I guess the goal is that, but I feel like there are multiple goals. Like the goal of self-realization is also to get out of the cycle of reincarnation, to get over sorrow, to conquer slash embrace death.
Hmm.
Uh, and then maybe an imperative to just know what is real,
Hmm.
as opposed and overcoming Maya and illusion. I feel like there are all these little pieces, as opposed to the student that's just like, hey, you know what? Um, oh, wise teacher, I just want ultimate pleasure, you know, right?
Yeah.
But it is one of the three such, sat, cheat, ananda. So the sat, what is it? Being consciousness bliss. And the ananda is bliss. And that little line is a classic sort of like Hindu line. There are a lot of actually people named Indian names with the sat or the cheat or the ananda
Hmm.
thrown in.
Hmm.
You know, bliss is the bliss is one of the fundamental pieces,
Hmm.
not to be dismissed. But my sense is that, um, yeah, my sense is that if I'm saying I just want that ultimate bliss, I feel like I'm back on ego.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, uh, is the ego what wants that, the ego has goals and desires. So
Yeah.
if you remove that, do you not have, well, it's not you anymore.
Yeah.
Does that state not have goals or desires?
Right.
Um, and maybe that's part of the bliss.
Unitive.
Hmm.
I mean, you know, I think that the unitive outlet, so all separateness is gone. Ego, I would imagine that state is gone. Not imagine it's gone.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, I mean, the whole idea of thinking about oneness and what that state is a headache, as it were. Should we jump to
Yeah.
the other opponent
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
sake of time? I liked this one, short though it was. So the big one here, I'm sorry, the Mundaka Upanishad, shorter.
Hmm.
Um, and this starts out with two levels of knowledge, the higher and the lower. You want to talk about that?
Hold on. I need to refresh myself.
That's right.
Right, right, right. Okay. What is it? What is that by knowing which all is known? The illumined sages say knowledge is twofold, higher and lower. The study of the Vedas, linguistics, interesting to bring that in,
Mhm.
rituals, astrology, and all the arts can be called the lower knowledge, and the higher is that which leads to self-realization.
By the way, this is interesting. So we've said this before. We're reading these out of orders. We'll be reading the Rig Veda
Yeah.
after this.
Hmm.
My error. Um, so it's interesting that in the evolution of this wisdom tradition, there is a move away from
Mm-hmm. From the
because
Vedas, even. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In fact, in my other reading, I think the word sorry, Vedanta,
Hmm.
the means end.
Oh.
And this is like a Vedanta text. It's sort of the end of the Vedas, initiating sort of a new phase. But the Vedas are not, I mean, they're pretty critical of rituals in this section, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Not just that. Well, I mean, actually, to be honest, there is no judgment. There's just higher, lower in this
Yeah.
section. But later on, well, I'll give you an example. 187, such rituals, middle of 7,
Hmm.
187, line 7, such rituals are unsafe rafts for crossing the sea of samsara of birth and death. Um, so I'm wondering in the with the Vedas in the early Hindu tradition, pre-Upanishads, if there is a focus on, as it were, I doubt they called them priests, but let's say the priest doing the ritual,
Hmm.
right? Higher ritual, as has been referenced, right? And
Mm.
and that the ritual and maybe had a function, maybe still has a function with the Upanishadic sages. I don't know, but a subordinate one.
Yeah. Yeah. And here we almost kind of get like, I mean, we see. Like ignorant of their ignorance, yet wise in their own esteem. Deluded men pour their vain learning, go round and round like blind led by the blind.
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah, and then living in darkness, immature, unaware of any higher good or goal, they fall again and again into the sea. This is like just going through the cycle again and again. It feels like
Yeah.
if you're stuck in
Exactly.
the rituals, you're stuck in the rut.
Right,
Hmm.
right. And what's interesting too is when you go to the bottom of 187, line 11, it says, "But those who are pure in heart, who practice meditation and conquer the senses," next page, "and passions shall attain the immortal self,
Hmm.
source of all life." Once again, light and source of all life.
Hmm.
What's interesting is that this is non-ritualistic, right?
Yeah,
Pure practice meditation. This is something that anyone can do outside of a temple, away from an altar or whatever, and practice themselves.
it's interesting, I guess, because I feel like meditation could be a ritual, but maybe it's
Yeah,
your approach to it that makes it ritualistic or not.
true. We'll have to see in the Rig Veda what is ritual.
Hmm.
My
That's fair.
sense, my sense, and I don't know this, but my sense is that it is more of like the context of like a worship service, to use a Protestant term,
Hmm.
or Catholic Mass, where there are particular rites and
Hmm.
sayings and offerings and incense. That's my vision of
Hmm.
it. Whereas, and we'll see, I could be wrong. Whereas with this is like, dude, you don't need a temple. You don't need the priest. You might need a wise man. Right? You need a
Right.
sage. But you need a cave with a smooth floor,
Yeah.
right? Right?
Yeah.
Or something akin to that. Um, So that I thought that that was interesting reading it. I was like, oh, this Upanishad is I feel like it's respecting the older rituals, but it's not making them predominant.
No.
You know,
I mean,
it
it
is
says, yeah,
it
you
is a
have to go
type of knowledge.
beyond. Hmm.
Yeah, it is a type of knowledge. Or if you want to look at it like at a long view, maybe the rituals are sort of like training wheels, and then you kick them off when you're
Sure,
ready.
sure.
You know. It's interesting on page 189. I just underlined on line 7. I'm sorry. From him come all spiritual disciplines: meditation, truth, faith, purity. Um, I'm sorry. From him, the Lord of Love.
Hmm.
Now, by
Hmm.
the way, the Lord of Love also is. I'm sorry, and those things seem to me very non-ritualistic and or separating from the ritual question. Um,
They're like
Valuable,
fundamental.
yeah, valuable things to focus on your way to self-realization.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
notice on 6, also from the Lord of Love come the scriptures, chants, prayers, religious rites, sacrificial gifts, right? So
Hmm.
we get, you know, we're getting sort of um, this interesting uh, dualism of the ritual and possibly the non,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
By the way, curious about this because it's the first time we've seen it, I think. From him come the 7 organs of sense, line 8, 7 hot desires and their sevenfold objects, and the 7 levels of consciousness. And I was thinking, those? Because in the Houston text, if you remember the Raja Yogi, he actually did talk like when you are meditating, you will
Yeah.
first this, then you go beyond sort of, you know, I forget I forget if it was like mind, ego, beyond ego, and
Hmm.
then
Was it
you sort of
seven though?
oh, I don't recall. I don't think
I
so.
feel like it was only like four or five, but
Yeah.
yeah, interesting. And
And
here
what are the
here comes the number seven from
what are the 7 organs of sense?
uh we gained two new senses, right?
Two new senses,
I wonder
seven
what that
desires,
meant.
and actually, you know what? After this call, I'm just gonna look up that line and try
Yeah.
and get like, what are the 7 hot desires? You know?
What are the seven organs?
Yeah,
Do you have,
exactly.
is it the two eyes and two ears? No.
Oh no. Yeah, unless they're talking about like
The mind's eye and
maybe that would be interesting. Wouldn't you have double the nostrils?
I don't know. Yeah,
Here's the
but
next
like the
one.
number seven is it comes up in other religions too, right? Like
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But I mean, when you say seven organs, I want to know what they are. That's
yeah, that's
y-
fair.
I'll allow poetry on the what was it, seven desires, but seven organs, that seems
And the
pretty
seven
concrete.
levels of consciousness. Yeah, yeah.
190. So section two,
Mm-hmm.
where you see two there. Bright but hidden. Once again, the theme of light. The self dwells in the heart. Everything that moves, breathes, opens and closes lives in the self. He is the source of love. And it was this section I thought that was really interesting. And may be known through love, but not through thought.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Right?
kind of going towards the
The
bhakti
yeah, the bhakti
yoga.
yoga,
Yeah.
the devotion to a god.
Yeah.
But I thought this was interesting because with the Jnana yoga, it allows for thought, right? Scripture
Yeah.
study, reflection, all those things. Um, but I will say that in the other one of the other books I'm reading, it makes a distinction between the way the East and the West approach religion and
Mm-hmm.
and God, and within, or at least East, yeah, what, or we can say Hindu and West. Um, that oh, where the West is ultimately analyzing, um, uh, deliberating, using its thought to, make categories and try to ultimately draw conclusions through arguments.
Mm-hmm.
The Hindu tradition, and I liked the expression too, is the focus is on immediate perception.
Hmm.
So it's the thought, it's not to knock thought, and even in the book, it doesn't knock thought. It says that the Hindu and Indian tradition is rich with philosophy, but it does push for this idea that it's not it's not sort of like um, everything that exists has a cause. There cannot be an infinite series of causes, so there had to be a first cause. That first cause is God. There's no
Right.
immediate person God in that,
It's not. It's very
right?
logical,
Yeah,
or
but
this
there's
is
but
not
the
very logical. Or
that
well, I don't
yeah, we do these things.
know. Mm-hmm.
We can have that immediate perception.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not knocking thought, but thought has its limitations, right?
Right.
Thought has its limitations in sort of reaching that goal, and there we have love again,
Mm-hmm.
uh, of being, and you could probably squeeze love into all four of the yogas, although bhakti is probably the more obvious one,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But I thought that was a bold statement, and
Yeah,
hence
I
to be
don't.
on.
I feel like, I mean, we're talking about the Lord of Love, and so, like, I think in the last one we were talking about the Lord of Life, and so
Mhm.
maybe we're just looking at that aspect of the self, and there's multiple aspects, and like,
Yeah.
there's multiple ways to realize the self. So, in order to realize the Lord of Love, you can
Mhm.
only do that through love. Hmm.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Um, there could be something sort of cold in analysis, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
There, there's not a there's with love you are vulnerable,
Hmm.
right? You are open, you know. Not so much with logic and critical thinking.
Hmm.
Loved this image on bottom of 190. Take the bow of the sacred scriptures, place on it the arrow of devotion, then draw the bowstring of meditation and aim at the target, the Lord of love. The mantram is the bow, the aspirant is the arrow, and the Lord the target. Now draw the bowstring of meditation and hitting the target, be one with him. Powerful.
Yeah, it's
Just a
beautiful.
powerful image, you
Yeah,
know?
it's more potent than the horse with the reins, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, and we'll get to see those sacred scriptures, or at least part of them, when we read the Rig Veda.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, devotion. Wow, it's strong. Do
Yeah.
you like the image of birds on the next page, 192?
192, the birds. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like two golden
Like,
birds perched on the self same tree. Intimate friends, the ego and the self, dwell in the same body. The former eats the sweet and sour fruits of the tree of life, while the latter looks on in detachment. Yeah.
crazy.
And then, I mean, here we get back to our discussion of the ego, right? In the verse 2 on 192. As long as we think we are the ego, we feel attached and fall into sorrow.
Yeah,
But realize that you are the self, the Lord of life, and you will be freed from sorrow. When you
yeah,
realize that you are the self, supreme source of light, supreme source of love, you transcend the duality of life and enter into the unitive
yeah.
state.
hmm the ego sorrow connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, even from a non-religious perspective, right? Because you're the ego. I mean, I don't want to say the ego wants, but the ego suffers, the ego struggles,
It
the
loses
ego.
things. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
attached, right? So if you're attached to something and then you lose that thing, then
yeah,
that's where sorrow comes in, right?
right.
And so it's because of the attachment that you experience sorrow. So if you are away from the ego, then uh, then you aren't attached to things. So you don't experience the same kind of sorrow, or you can't experience
Yeah,
sorrow. Yeah.
yeah. It's almost like another way of putting it is you're attached to the wrong thing.
Mm. What do you mean?
You should be attached to the self. You should be attached to Brahman. You should be attached to the Lord of
Yeah.
Light.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ultimate attachment,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as opposed to, I mean, or if you want to another image, it's not what it's ultimately not being attached to things outside. This will bring me pleasure. I need this. I need this job. I need this money. I need this house. It's actually, ironically, I need what I already have or what I already am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just my focus is off, you know.
Right.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
The next section is beautiful too. On 193, the Lord of Love shines in the hearts of all. Again, theme of light.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing him in all creatures, the wise forget themselves in the service of all. You've got the whole like flow there, and also ego loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Service of all. The Lord is their joy, the Lord is their rest, such as they are the lovers of the Lord. And then we get by truth, meditation, and self control, one can enter into this state of joy and see the self shining in a pure heart. Um,
Yeah.
a little bit further down, beyond the reach of the senses is he, line 8, but not beyond the reach of a mind stilled through the practice of deep meditation. You know,
Meditation is the key, is what I'm getting from all of
yeah,
this.
it is. It is.
In all of these.
The tool, the exercise,
Yeah.
the right.
Yeah.
Um, to get there, but also I would imagine, well, and we've talked about this before, but meditation as a sitting practice, but also meditation in all that we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Presence.
also like presence in, yeah, in all that we do, a stilled mind, which we would have in meditation, but also we can have in a conversation
Mm-hmm.
uh, with others. So, but yes, that theme is on large repeat.
Yeah. And we're at time, so we should
Okay, good.
wrap up.
Excellent. Om Shanti Shanti
Om
Shanti.
Shanti Shanti Shanti. All right.